Ladies and gentlemen, in my opinion, you should not play Gothic 3 Forsaken Gods. In this video, we will be evaluating why this expansion is a waste of time and why you should avoid it like the plague.
Huh? Who? A service? Oh yes? Why not? Are you a slave?
No, I'm just a fellow citizen of Murtana. Who are you?
I'm a slave. No. An orc? No, that can't be right. An alchemist. Yes, I'm an alchemist. Goodness, don't ask me my name.
But first, a little bit of background is required. Piranha Bytes, the company behind the first 3 Gothic games, ended their partnership with Joe Wood Publishing. To quote Piranha Bytes, there were a couple of differences in opinion between the publisher and us, and the whole thing collapsed when the publisher forced us to release Gothic 3 while it was not ready. Joe Wood retained the Gothic trademark, and Piranha Bytes would go on to create Risen, but that's a video for another day. So Trine, an Indian developer, was then tasked to create an expansion. So 2 years after Gothic 3's release, we were given Forsaken Gods. So what exactly did they create in this time? Number 1. Performance? Gothic 3 was by no means a perfect game. Upon release, it was buggy as all hell, and even after multiple community patches, a lot of the time it still ran like absolute arse, even on modern hardware. To give you some idea, my computer is not completely top of the range, but I can quite happily run games like Far Cry 3 at a good 60 frames a second on high settings to very high, or Skyrim on ultra at least 30 frames a second. Whilst playing Gothic 3, I tweaked the settings and was able to get anywhere between 30 and 60 frames a second. The game looked gorgeous, and all I did was sacrifice draw distance. However, those same settings applied to Forsaken Gods yield massively different results. At the worst times, especially probably in the footage you're seeing here, I was getting drops down to 25. And there's nothing really on the screen. From the footage you can probably see there's no wildlife, there's no vegetation even. It just runs terribly, and of course this is made really worse once you get into the towns. Even in Gothic 3's towns, I was getting a minimum of 30. Here, I think my lowest that I saw it plunge to was 22, which is absolutely abysmal. I do have a quote from Trine talking about their difficulties using the engine, but I will supply that later on in this video. All I will say for now is even with the latest community patch applied to the game, it still doesn't run amazingly well, and probably proves the fact that Trine didn't really know what they were doing with the engine on a whole. Number 2. Copy and paste. Unlike Gothic 2's lengthy add-in, Night of the Raven, Forsaken Gods rehashes more content than you can shake a stick at. The game takes place once again in Murtana, and the towns have been ripped directly from Gothic 3 with little to no change. A further insult is the actual landmass separating the towns appears to have been greatly reduced, making the game area considerably smaller than before. Trine already had all the assets, so why did they do this? One reason: the bigger the map, the more things you have to put in to populate it. You can quite happily wander outside of the towns and not see anything of note for minutes at a time. In my short time playing the game, I found more chests in the wilderness than I did actual enemies. Character models are once again 90% ripped from Gothic 3. The nameless hero, however, has had a redesign for some reason. And whether or not you like his new look is all down to your personal taste. During my time playing, I also discovered that there were new pieces of armour and weapons available. However, I can't be sure what's been added by the community patch and what was actually there in the original game. I would say 90% of the assets, however, are still ripped from Gothic 3. Continuing on the copy and paste line, we reach the audio. The music is still the top-notch score from Gothic 3, so nothing really has happened there, but something has gone a bit wrong with the voice acting. All the characters now have new voices, which in itself isn't a problem. The issue raises its head, however, when an NPC such as Gorn speaks to you in his new voice, only to have sound clips play from his old Gothic 3 one whenever he's doing something else. You can talk to him, You get the new voice, you then click on him after the conversation's ended, and you will get the old one. This can be especially jarring when the two voice actors sound nothing alike. This even happens to our nameless hero. Are you seriously telling me you did not have enough time to record the main fucking character? That's a cardinal sin and breaks the bloody immersion straight off the bat. Gothic 2 reused assets from the original Gothic en masse, but improved the original assets and expanded the world greatly. 75% of the Gothic 1 map is actually in Gothic 2, but it was changed and modified heavily. Looking at Forsaken Gods so far, you're probably wondering, so what the hell did Trine actually do here? Number 3. Combat? One thing Trine did do was to modify the combat system by making endurance actually important this time around. In Gothic 3, you could mostly just constantly left-click your way through fights, even with your stamina bar depleted, and you'd still succeed. So what did Trine do? Did they add in a dodge mechanic? Make it so wolves weren't more deadly than a group of orcs? No! They buggered it up. Thankfully, I'm not experiencing their combat system as it was first presented. The community patches appear to have knocked it more back to how it was in Gothic 3, however there are still some changes. Originally, however, Trine had it so once your stamina bar was depleted, you couldn't attack. Well, that sounds reasonable, doesn't it? Go on the defensive until your bar recharges and then attack again. Main downside of this system is every time you get attacked, you also lose stamina. Something that actually still is in the game even after the community patches, but luckily it doesn't have the same detrimental effect. Thankfully, it appears the community patch completely gets rid of that system, with one main gripe. Enemies can now infoblock, and what I mean by that is, once an enemy is blocking, you cannot hurt them in any way, shape or form. Your attacks will just bounce off them. That adds a hell of a lot more of the problem to the game, especially when you're attacked by a group of enemies. Let's ignore wolves. If you get attacked by wolves, you'll still be dead in seconds unless you manage to pick them off one by one very quickly. Overall, I'm not against the changes that Trine tried to put in. Stamina systems are in many other games, but here it's been executed extremely poorly, and Trine didn't actually fix the problems that the main Gothic 3 system actually had. They've just created new ones. Number 4. Story. The last point of contention has to be the story, or lack thereof. Without going into too many spoilers, you arrive in Mortana with the intention of creating a lasting peace between the orcs and the humans. Sounds duller than bloody watching paint dry, doesn't it? Especially as this is a topic we already covered in Gothic 3. Gothic 3 you had the option of whose side you were going to pick. I picked the orcs, of course. The game doesn't actually start on a particularly good gambit, with the nameless hero once again forgetting almost every skill he picked up in the previous games. I get it, he starts the game injured, but that doesn't mean I have to drop 50 levels. I know that Gothic 2 did this because they wanted to do everything as a clean slate, but this is taking the piss. So how about the first quest? Anog, a rebel leader from Gothic 3, who in the original game sounds like Steve Blum and in the new game does not, tasks you with collecting 5 recommendation letters from people in the town to prove you're trustworthy. In Gothic 3, you could choose to side with the orcs, the Heshishin, or the rebels, or just kill everyone if you so chose. Forsaken Gods assumes you chose the rebel route since Anog is alive. That means that if you had done the rebel route in Gothic 3, you would have liberated cities from the orcs, countless cities, and liberated Mortana for the humans. And now Anog. You're telling me I have to bring you letters to prove I'm trustworthy. Fuck you, Anog. I'm glad I killed you in my Gothic 3 playthrough. And as you can see from the footage on the screen, certain characters are now invincible. Before I delve too much into the other reasons why the story pisses me off, let's actually talk about the quests for a moment. The quests I experienced in my time playing consisted of a lot of throwaway tasks. Fetch 5 of these flowers, kill these bandits, etc, etc. Quests like these are fine, but due to the lack of a driving, larger narrative plot, I have no agency to run around and do busy work. In the other Gothic games, all your initial questing was to essentially get your reputation up enough with a faction to give you the choice of joining them. Then the game's main plot would properly open up and you'd venture forth. In Forsaken Gods, I couldn't give a sod of Anarch, trust me. And no, I don't want to collect your bloody flowers. If there is a complex story here, I honestly do not have the patience to find out. And as a little bit of a spoiler, I have actually investigated the story, and there is a character called Thorus. If you have played Gothic 1 and 2, and actually 3, you will be familiar with Thorus as he's been in every single game. Thorus in this game is portrayed as a bad guy. Thorus is not a bad guy. He essentially just wants peace, and this is another example of how this game fucks it up completely. But anyway, the story as a whole. In Gothic 3 I worked the orcs, I wiped out the Hashishin, destroyed the rebels completely. You're dead, Anog. As far as I'm concerned, you are not canon right about now. And I murdered not just the king, but his entire forces. I decided that Zardos and the orcs were the only proper way of stopping the war, and that humans were the problem. The nameless hero finished the game leading with Zardos, and Mortana was at peace. My biggest gripe with Forsaken Gods is the utter disregard for the choices made in the previous game, and that mostly the fact it carries on the Goody Two-Shoes storyline. But because of this, I have no want to see this story forward. I doubt Piranha Bytes would have created something so lapse to the lore either, instead possibly opting for an add-in, the same as did with Night of the Raven. The fact that you have, I say 3 main endings to Gothic 3, although there are variations on those endings, and then you have this should not exist. And as I'm a person that likes to play a game one way, and that is canon for me, for example, Mass Effect, my Shepard is a dick. And that is what Shepard is to me. The same way in this one, the nameless hero is a sarcastic person that does whatever it takes for the greater good. That character that I have spent probably 100 hours with over 3 games is not in this game. Number 5. Conclusions. Hopefully you can already see that this game should be avoided. Not only does it not feel like a Gothic game, but it's horribly pieced together from some actually good assets. Or is it? Is trying actually to blame Heather for what really is this unnecessary piece of work? I would actually say not as much as you would think. In an interview with Sayan Gupta from Trine, and I'm really sorry I might have butchered that name, he states, "The limitations of picking up PB's code and trying to push content from day one, you can say that we were not able to fully portray what we originally intended. The scripting engine from PB creates a lot of bugs when it comes to developing content. And also, with the project being in such a short development time, having technical limitations such as time and codebase, we felt that we could do much more than what is currently presented in Gothic 3 Forsaken Gods." So how does this clear them of some of the blame? They were given a concrete release date, and were tasked with working with assets and an engine that was buggy and unfinished, and more importantly, that the team had no experience using. They had to actually learn the engine, and to quote the dev, "Working with the editors was very troublesome, as it would take up to 10 minutes to load up on our machines. Random crashes would eat more time, as the program had to be loaded again. They were therefore a studio who unfortunately were not up to what actually appears to be a mammoth task, and does explain how we ended up with the product presented here. I would levy more of an accusation against Joe Wood. They're actually thinking that this was necessary in the first place, as they had already at this point decided that they were going to make Arcana, which to them would be Gothic 4. However, even with the 2.01 community patch applied, Forsaken Gods is an atrocious failure, when compared to what came before it. Joe Wood would actually issue a statement saying Joe Wood Productions would like to present their apologies to the fans for releasing an unsatisfying game. Unfortunately, it wasn't possible for us to release a game that could fully satisfy you for different reasons. To summarise, only the most hardcore fan should bother playing this, and even as someone who loves the first 3 games of the series, I couldn't stomach more than 2 hours of playtime. More because I was just bored. Thankfully, it's not considered canon, so avoid and pretend that this doesn't exist. After this disappointment, I now have to ready myself to play Arcana, but that's a topic for another video. Cheers to watching, and I'll see you next time.